Have you ever noticed that the people who command the most respect are rarely the loudest people in the room? They are not constantly explaining themselves. They are not chasing approval. They are not reacting to every criticism, every insult, or every opinion thrown in their direction. Instead, they possess something far more dangerous: control over their attention. People often believe that power comes from speaking louder, proving others wrong, or demanding attention at every opportunity. But real power begins with understanding one simple truth: your attention is your most valuable possession. It is more valuable than money because money can be earned again, while every second of attention you spend can never be recovered. The world is filled with people competing for your focus. They want your reaction, your approval, your anger, your time, and your emotional energy. Every notification, every argument, every criticism, and every unnecessary conversation is competing for the same limited resource. The moment you begin giving your attention away carelessly, you also begin giving away your power. This is why the most influential people are extremely selective about what deserves their focus. They understand that attention is a form of investment. Just as a wise investor does not waste money on worthless opportunities, a wise individual does not waste mental energy on people or situations that produce no value. Most people never realize this because they react automatically. Someone insults them, and they immediately respond. Someone ignores them, and they become desperate for an answer. Someone criticizes them, and they spend hours trying to defend themselves. Every reaction hands control to another person. Robert Greene teaches that whoever controls your emotions controls your behavior. If someone can make you angry whenever they choose, they have already gained influence over your mind. The strongest individuals refuse to surrender that control. They choose where their attention goes instead of allowing others to decide for them. They recognize that not every opinion deserves consideration, not every conflict deserves participation, and not every person deserves access to their thoughts. This mindset transforms the way they move through life. Rather than chasing approval, they pursue mastery. Rather than arguing with critics, they improve themselves. Rather than becoming trapped in emotional battles, they direct every ounce of energy toward their goals. Over time, this creates an enormous advantage because focused attention compounds just like money invested wisely. Every hour spent learning, building, creating, or improving yourself produces future rewards, while every hour wasted on pointless drama disappears forever. People are naturally drawn toward those who appear completely absorbed in a meaningful purpose because focus signals confidence, discipline, and inner strength. When you guard your attention as if it were your greatest treasure, you become harder to manipulate, harder to distract, and far more capable of achieving extraordinary results. That is why the first step toward becoming powerful is not controlling other people. It is controlling where your attention goes every single day. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of power because modern society teaches that you must always respond, explain yourself, and defend your position. Yet the people who truly understand human psychology know that silence often has a greater impact than words ever could. When someone expects a reaction from you and receives nothing instead, their mind begins to work against them. Human beings naturally seek closure. They want certainty, feedback, and emotional confirmation that they have been noticed. When you remove that confirmation through silence, you create psychological tension. Suddenly, the person who wanted your attention begins wondering what you are thinking. They replay the interaction repeatedly, searching for clues and inventing explanations. This is why silence often lingers in someone's mind much longer than an argument. A harsh reply may satisfy emotions for a moment, but silence leaves questions unanswered, and unanswered questions are difficult for the human mind to ignore. Robert Greene often emphasizes that mystery increases influence, because people are fascinated by what they cannot fully understand. The moment you explain everything about yourself, you remove curiosity. The moment you react to every accusation, you reveal exactly how to manipulate your emotions. But when you remain calm and composed, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability creates respect. This does not mean using silence as a childish game or pretending to ignore people simply to gain attention. True silence comes from emotional control, not manipulation. It comes from understanding that not every opinion deserves a response, and not every challenge deserves your energy. Imagine someone insults you in front of others, expecting to provoke an angry reaction. If you immediately defend yourself, they have achieved their objective. They controlled your emotions with only a few words. But if you remain composed and refuse to react, the emotional reward they were seeking disappears. Often, the people watching the situation become more impressed by your self-control than they ever would have been by a clever comeback. Calmness under pressure communicates confidence without saying a single word. It suggests that your self-worth is not dependent on winning every argument or proving yourself to everyone around you. Silence also gives you something extremely valuable: time. Instead of making decisions driven by emotion, you gain space to think clearly, evaluate motives, and choose your next move wisely. Many of life's biggest mistakes are made during moments of emotional intensity, when people speak before thinking. Those who master silence avoid unnecessary conflicts, protect their reputation, and maintain control over their image. In a world where everyone feels compelled to speak instantly, the person who knows when to remain silent possesses a quiet strength that others cannot easily imitate or overcome. Most people mistake emotional reactions for strength. They believe that defending themselves immediately, expressing every feeling, or confronting every act of disrespect proves confidence. In reality, these habits often reveal the opposite. They show that other people have the ability to control your emotional state. The strongest individuals understand that true power is not measured by how intensely you react, but by how completely you control yourself. Emotional control is one of the rarest forms of strength because it requires discipline rather than impulse. Anyone can become angry, argue, or seek revenge in the heat of the moment. Very few people can remain calm while being criticized, ignored, or underestimated. Robert Greene repeatedly highlights that those who master themselves become far more difficult to manipulate than those who constantly chase emotional satisfaction. Every person you meet has opinions, expectations, and intentions. Some genuinely want to help you, while others want to provoke you, distract you, or pull you into unnecessary conflict. If every harsh comment changes your mood or every disagreement ruins your peace, then your emotions no longer belong to you. They belong to whoever knows which buttons to press. That is why emotional discipline is not simply a personality trait, it is a strategic advantage. Imagine two people facing the same insult. The first immediately raises their voice, argues, and spends the rest of the day thinking about what happened. The second listens, says very little, and continues working toward their goals without allowing the moment to consume their mind. Days later, the first person is still emotionally exhausted, while the second has invested that same energy into growth and progress. Over time, these small differences create enormous gaps in success, confidence, and influence. Emotional control also protects your reputation. People often remember how you reacted under pressure more than the pressure itself. Someone who remains composed during conflict naturally appears more trustworthy, mature, and capable of leadership. Calmness communicates that your confidence comes from within, rather than from the opinions of others. It tells the world that you do not need to prove your value through emotional outbursts. This does not mean suppressing every emotion or pretending that nothing affects you. It means choosing your response instead of allowing your feelings to choose it for you. There is a profound difference between feeling anger and being controlled by anger. The first is human. The second is dangerous. Every unnecessary reaction gives away a piece of your mental freedom. Every moment of restraint strengthens it. The more control you develop over your emotions, the less influence other people have over your decisions, your confidence, and your future. Eventually, you reach a point where insults become background noise, criticism becomes useful information instead of a personal attack, and praise no longer determines your self-worth. At that moment, you possess something few people ever achieve, the ability to remain steady regardless of the chaos around you. That quiet mastery of yourself is the foundation of lasting power. Scarcity is one of the most powerful psychological principles influencing human behavior, yet very few people recognize how deeply it shapes the way others perceive value. People naturally appreciate what is limited and often overlook what is constantly available. This pattern appears everywhere, in luxury goods, rare opportunities, influential leaders, and even personal relationships. The same principle applies to your attention, your time, and your presence. When you are always available, always responding immediately, and always seeking to be noticed, your presence becomes predictable. Predictability slowly reduces perceived value because people begin to assume that your attention will always be there whenever they want it. Robert Greene often emphasizes that mystery and selective availability create fascination because the human mind is naturally drawn toward what it cannot easily possess. This does not mean becoming distant for the sake of manipulation or intentionally ignoring people to create artificial interest. Instead, it means building a life so focused on meaningful goals that your availability naturally becomes limited. A person with a clear mission does not have endless hours to waste on gossip, unnecessary conversations, or constant reassurance. Their priorities create healthy boundaries, and those boundaries increase the value of their time. Consider individuals who are deeply committed to mastering a skill, building a business, writing a book, or pursuing a meaningful purpose. They are not unavailable because they want others to chase them. They are unavailable because they are investing their energy into something greater than temporary approval. That quiet dedication becomes visible to everyone around them. People begin to respect them because they recognize that this individual values their own time. Human beings instinctively mirror the value you place on yourself. If you treat your attention as precious, others are more likely to respect it. If you give it away freely to anyone who demands it, many people will begin to take it for granted. Scarcity also protects you from emotional dependency. When your happiness depends on constant communication or continuous validation, you become vulnerable to disappointment whenever that attention disappears. By creating a fulfilling life filled with purpose, learning, discipline, and personal growth, you reduce that dependency. You no longer wait for messages to feel important or for compliments to feel confident. Your identity becomes rooted in your actions rather than in other people's responses. This independence is deeply attractive because it reflects inner security. People are naturally curious about individuals who appear content without seeking constant recognition. They wonder what gives them such confidence and stability. That curiosity often leads to respect, admiration, and influence without any effort to demand it. Scarcity also improves your decision-making because it forces you to become intentional about where your energy goes. Every invitation, conversation, and commitment is evaluated according to whether it aligns with your long-term vision. Instead of saying yes to everything out of fear of missing out, you begin saying yes only to opportunities that genuinely contribute to your growth. This selective approach strengthens your reputation because people recognize that when you do choose to invest your time, your presence carries weight. In a world where attention is cheap and distractions are endless, becoming selective with your availability transforms your time into one of your greatest assets, quietly increasing your influence without the need for constant words or displays of importance. One of the greatest illusions people live under is the belief that influence comes from making others like them. They spend years trying to win approval, avoid conflict, explain every decision, and convince everyone of their good intentions. Yet the more desperately someone seeks acceptance, the more control they unknowingly hand over to the people whose opinions they value. Real influence begins in the opposite direction. It begins with emotional detachment. Robert Greene often reveals that the individuals who hold the greatest power are not those who constantly chase relationships, validation, or recognition, but those who are completely capable of standing alone. This ability to detach does not mean becoming cold, heartless, or indifferent to the people around you. It means refusing to allow your emotional stability to depend on someone else's behavior. When your happiness rises and falls with another person's approval, you become predictable. Your actions become driven by fear of rejection instead of confidence in your own values. Every compliment becomes addictive, and every criticism feels like a personal attack. In that state, your emotions are no longer yours to control. They belong to anyone who understands how to manipulate them. Detachment is often misunderstood because society celebrates emotional dependence under different names. Constant availability is mistaken for loyalty. Endless sacrifice is mistaken for love. Pleasing everyone is mistaken for kindness. But there is a profound difference between caring deeply and becoming emotionally controlled. A person who cares without attachment can make difficult decisions, establish healthy boundaries, and walk away from situations that damage their peace. A person who is emotionally dependent often tolerates disrespect, manipulation, and dishonesty simply because they fear losing someone's approval. This fear quietly shapes every decision they make. Think about how often people remain trapped in unhealthy friendships, toxic workplaces, or destructive relationships because they cannot imagine being alone. They accept behavior that contradicts their values because they believe losing the connection would hurt more than enduring the pain. Unfortunately, this mindset attracts even more manipulation. Those who sense desperation often exploit it, consciously or unconsciously. They recognize that someone who fears abandonment is easier to control. The moment another person realizes you will do anything to keep them in your life, the balance of power shifts. Your choices become reactions to their behavior instead of expressions of your own principles. True detachment restores that balance. It allows you to appreciate people without depending on them for your identity. You begin to enjoy relationships because they add value to your life, not because they define your worth. This subtle shift changes everything. You stop overthinking delayed messages, canceled plans, or temporary distance. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself endlessly or chase people who have chosen to leave. Instead, you recognize that every person has the freedom to make their own choices, just as you have the freedom to protect your peace. Ironically, this independence often makes others respect you more because confidence naturally grows where desperation disappears. Detachment also strengthens decision-making. Emotions are valuable because they provide information, but they become dangerous when they dominate judgment. Many of life's worst decisions are made during moments of emotional attachment. People invest in failing businesses because they cannot accept defeat. They remain in destructive relationships because they remember happier times. They trust individuals who repeatedly betray them because they hope things will somehow change. Emotional attachment clouds perception, making it difficult to see reality as it truly is. Detachment clears that fog. It allows you to evaluate situations based on facts instead of wishes, patterns instead of promises, and actions instead of words. Robert Greene frequently emphasizes that observing from a distance provides strategic clarity. When you are emotionally consumed by a situation, every event feels personal. Every disagreement seems like an attack. Every setback appears catastrophic. But when you step back mentally, you begin noticing patterns that were previously invisible. You understand people's motives more clearly because you are no longer blinded by your desire for a specific outcome. This perspective enables wiser decisions, stronger boundaries, and greater resilience in every area of life. Detachment also protects your energy. Every day, people attempt to pull you into unnecessary drama, arguments, jealousy, gossip, and emotional chaos. If you respond to every invitation into conflict, your mind becomes exhausted before you have accomplished anything meaningful. The disciplined individual understands that attention is a limited resource. They refuse to spend it on people who contribute nothing to their growth. Instead, they direct that energy toward learning, creating, building, improving, and pursuing long-term goals. Over months and years, This disciplined investment produces extraordinary results, while others remain trapped in endless cycles of emotional distraction. There is another hidden advantage to detachment that many people overlook. It makes your confidence internal rather than external. When your self-worth depends on applause, you become anxious whenever recognition disappears. When it depends on social approval, you begin shaping your personality to satisfy everyone around you. But when your confidence comes from your character, discipline, and personal standards, outside opinions lose much of their influence. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes information instead of devastation. Rejection becomes redirection rather than proof of inadequacy. People often assume detached individuals lack emotion, but the opposite is usually true. They simply refuse to let emotions dictate their behavior. They experience disappointment, frustration, and sadness like everyone else, yet they choose responses that serve their long-term interests instead of temporary impulses. That ability to separate feelings from decisions is one of the defining characteristics of enduring strength. It allows a person to remain calm during conflict, patient during uncertainty, and focused during distraction. Ultimately, detachment is freedom. It frees you from the exhausting need to impress everyone, from the fear of losing people who do not value you, and from the constant emotional turbulence created by seeking validation. When you no longer chase approval, you begin attracting respect. When you no longer fear solitude, your presence carries greater confidence. When you stop allowing other people's opinions to define your identity, you discover a quiet strength that cannot be taken away. That inner independence becomes the foundation of authentic influence, because the person who can walk away with peace, remain steady under pressure, and continue moving toward a meaningful purpose is the person who possesses a kind of power that no one else can easily control or destroy. The greatest transformation in a person's life begins the moment they stop organizing their days around other people's opinions and start organizing them around a meaningful mission. Most individuals spend an extraordinary amount of energy wondering what others think about them. They worry about being accepted, admired, respected, or understood. They replay conversations in their minds, analyze criticism for days, and constantly compare their progress with the success of others. While this may seem harmless, it quietly steals the one resource that determines every future achievement: focus attention. Robert Greene repeatedly demonstrates that history's most influential figures were not consumed by the opinions of the crowd. They possessed an unwavering commitment to a vision greater than temporary approval. They understood that every significant accomplishment requires the courage to disappoint people who cannot see the bigger picture. Your mission becomes the compass that protects you from distraction. Without it, every opinion feels important, every criticism feels personal, and every obstacle appears overwhelming. But when your purpose is clear, something remarkable happens. You naturally begin filtering information according to whether it serves your long-term objective. You stop wasting hours arguing with strangers, defending yourself against unfair judgments, or trying to convince people who have already decided not to understand you. Instead, you quietly return to your work. This simple habit separates highly effective people from those who remain trapped in cycles of emotional reaction. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must respond to every accusation or misunderstanding. They assume silence means weakness and explanation proves confidence. In reality, constant explanation often reveals insecurity. The more desperately you try to control how everyone perceives you, the less time you spend becoming the person you want to be. Reputation built through words is fragile because it depends on continuous maintenance. Reputation built through consistent action becomes nearly impossible to destroy. Over time, achievements speak more loudly than arguments ever could. Consider how easily attention is stolen in the modern world. Every notification competes for your focus. Every headline demands an emotional reaction. Every social media post invites comparison. Every disagreement tempts you to prove your intelligence or defend your beliefs. These distractions appear small individually, But together they consume countless hours that could have been invested in learning, practicing, creating, or building something meaningful. The disciplined individual recognizes this invisible cost. They understand that success is rarely determined by dramatic moments of inspiration. It is built through thousands of ordinary decisions about where attention is placed every single day. Robert Greene often emphasizes that mastery demands intense concentration. No artist, entrepreneur, athlete, scientist, or leader reaches extraordinary levels while constantly seeking validation from everyone around them. Mastery requires isolation from unnecessary noise. It requires saying no to distractions that promise immediate satisfaction but produce no lasting value. The world rewards those who remain committed long after excitement disappears. This commitment becomes impossible if every outside opinion has the power to redirect your focus. Ignoring unnecessary opinions does not mean rejecting constructive criticism. Wise individuals actively seek feedback from mentors, trusted advisors, and people whose experience can genuinely improve their performance. The difference is that they carefully choose whose opinions deserve influence. They do not allow random negativity from uninformed observers to shape important decisions. Every successful person eventually discovers that criticism often says more about the critic than the person being criticized. Those who have never attempted something meaningful frequently discourage those who do. If you allow every negative voice to determine your direction, you will never travel far enough to discover your true potential. Purpose also creates emotional stability. When your identity revolves around meaningful work rather than public approval, rejection loses much of its power. Failure becomes education instead of humiliation. Delays become opportunities for preparation rather than reasons for despair. You begin measuring success by your commitment to growth instead of temporary recognition. This shift produces remarkable resilience because your motivation no longer depends on applause. Whether people notice your efforts today becomes less important than whether your actions move you closer to the future you are building. There is another psychological advantage to living with purpose. People naturally respect individuals who possess clear direction. Confidence is attractive not because it demands attention, but because it reflects certainty. Someone deeply committed to a meaningful mission rarely appears desperate for approval because their fulfillment comes from progress itself. Their conversations become more intentional, their decisions become more disciplined, and their presence communicates quiet determination. Others sense this stability even when it is never spoken aloud. Many people postpone their ambitions because they fear criticism. They avoid starting businesses, writing books, changing careers, or pursuing difficult goals because they imagine what others might say. Yet history repeatedly shows that every meaningful achievement attracts skepticism before it earns admiration. If you wait until everyone supports your vision, you will likely spend your entire life waiting. Courage is not the absence of criticism. It is the willingness to continue despite it. When you devote yourself completely to a mission, your priorities naturally change. Temporary pleasures lose their grip because they no longer compete successfully with long-term fulfillment. Petty arguments become insignificant compared to the satisfaction of steady progress. People who once consumed your thoughts begin fading into the background because your attention has found a higher purpose. This is not an act of arrogance or indifference. It is an act of discipline. You recognize that your future is shaped far more by the habits you practice than by the opinions you collect. Ultimately, the most powerful people are not those who convince everyone to admire them. They are the ones who remain committed to their purpose regardless of praise or criticism. Their energy is invested in creation rather than comparison, in discipline rather than distraction, and in progress rather than approval. They understand that every hour spent chasing validation is an hour stolen from building a meaningful life. By focusing relentlessly on your mission and refusing to surrender your attention to every passing opinion, you develop a quiet authority that cannot be manufactured through words alone. That unwavering dedication becomes the source of lasting confidence, genuine influence, and the kind of power that continues to grow long after temporary opinions have disappeared.